Here's something that most people don't even realize. Why June 19th is such a special day. Because June 19th is both Juneteenth and José Rizal's birthday. José Rizal was born in 1861 in the middle of the Spanish Empire in the Philippines. 4 years later, in 1865, black communities in Texas were finally told that they were free. 2.5 years after they were supposed to be emancipated. Now at first you might think that, okay, that's just a coincidence. Two completely different stories on two different continents. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that these two moments, despite being separated by oceans, these historic moments are connected in more ways than just sharing a simple date. Both are about people fighting for freedom. Both are about the long and messy struggle for justice and liberation. One is a holiday in Texas, while the other one was a Filipino hero born 8,000 miles away in Laguna. Same day, different stories, but maybe, just maybe, not so different after all. Mabuhay! Earn Kapampangan, luwid kayo! Welcome to my channel, it's me Kirby Araullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. Now today's video is not about comparing apples to oranges. I'm not saying that Juneteenth and José Rizal's birthday are exactly the same thing, or that somehow one led to the other. That's not the point. But I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how people in different parts of the world have fought back against empire, against racism, against being told that they're less than human. And the more I look at it, the more I see how these stories, even if they're totally separated by oceans on two separate continents, these moments still speak to each other, still echoing the same things, the same message for justice and liberation. But let's step back for a second. Juneteenth and José Rizal didn't just happen out of nowhere. If we truly want to understand the significance of these moments, the importance of these dates and these people, then we need to look back and understand the world, the kind of world they came from, the world they lived in. The mid-1800s was a world ruled by empires, by Western imperialism. In the US, millions of black people were still enslaved. Their bodies were used to build the country's immense wealth: cotton, sugar, tobacco, and more. But as we all know, they were denied any claim to freedom. They were denied humanity. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, Spain had been in power for 300 years. Our people were taxed heavily, forced into labor, and pushed through a colonial system that was designed to erase our indigenous cultures and turn us into obedient subjects, loyal to the crown and nothing more. And I'm not going to go over all the complicated details, all the details about the social hierarchies and the racist caste system under Spanish Empire. That's for another video. But the point is, you couldn't even question Spanish rule, not without consequences. Even spirituality and religion were weaponized. Our native cultures and identities were suppressed, and any hint of resistance was treated as a crime. I mean, literally, even just suspicion of resistance could lead you into jail, or worse, execution. Just like what happened to the Gomburza. So yeah, different places, different empires, but the logic was the same. Take the land, exploit the labor, keep the wealth, and control the people. That's the kind of world that José Rizal was born into. The kind of world, the same world that Juneteenth was trying to break. So let's take a closer look at these two stories. On one side we have Juneteenth, the day that the news of freedom finally reached the black communities in Texas, years after freedom was already won, years after it was promised by none other than Abraham Lincoln. Now on the other hand, we have José Rizal, a Filipino who didn't pick up a weapon but still managed to shake the very foundations of a 300-year-old empire. Now, on the surface, these two things may seem like two different stories happening on two separate continents. But if you think about it, at its very core, these things are all about people saying that we deserve better than this. We are humans too. We also deserve freedom and justice. So for those who may not know, June 19, 1865 was a historic date. That's when the Union soldiers showed up in Galveston, Texas, and finally told the people that slavery was over. But the thing is, the Emancipation Proclamation had already been signed 2.5 years earlier. But in Texas, a lot of the slave owners, just didn't say anything. They didn't tell the people that slavery was officially over. In fact, they kept black people in bondage on purpose, even though they knew that they were supposed to be free, finally free. And yet, instead of that day being remembered only as another example of delaying freedom and the continuing exploitation and injustices, black communities turned June 19th into something powerful, a beautiful celebration to honor survival, joy, and resistance all at once. In fact, for many black communities to this very day, June 19th or Juneteenth is far more meaningful than July 4th. Because June 19, 1865 was a reminder that black freedom was not granted on July 4, 1776, but it had to be seized decades later. And so for many black Americans, Juneteenth feels more honest than July 4th. Now from June 19, 1865, let's rewind back our time 4 years earlier to June 19, 1861. And you've got José Rizal being born in Calamba, Laguna, in Luzon, under Spanish rule. Now José Rizal grew up experiencing firsthand how colonialism humiliated people, how colonialism controlled them and made people question their own worth, how it made us question our own humanity. And instead of staying quiet, instead of basking in his privileges, José Rizal wrote, and he named what was happening. He exposed these injustices and exploitation through his novels like No Le Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. He exposed it through his letters, his essays, and everything he had. José Rizal made people, the Filipino people, realize what they knew all along, what they've been experiencing every day, that something was wrong, and more importantly, that they didn't have to accept it. Together with his friends, José Rizal called out injustices and exploitation. And José Rizal inspired people, not just in the Philippines, but across Southeast Asia, to start believing that change was not just possible, it was necessary. So, what exactly is the point? I mean, Juneteenth didn't end racism, and José Rizal didn't actually free the Philippines. Juneteenth was supposed to be the end of slavery, but sadly, it was not the end of exploitation. Freedom came late, and even then, it came with conditions. The systems just shifted. Plantation owners, slave owners became landlords, and enslaved black people became sharecroppers. And new laws were written to criminalize black survival, to prevent them from genuinely gaining freedom. I mean, for example, the 13th Amendment officially abolished slavery, except, quote-unquote, as a punishment for a crime. And that loophole was no accident. It became the backbone of the prison labor system, a system that still exists today. And if you're Filipino thinking that this does not affect me, think again, because a similar system was also implemented in the Philippines. And now we've got mass incarceration. We've got cops killing black people on camera, and yet still getting away with it. We've got states banning black history in classrooms, banning books, banning the truth, while at the same time celebrating Juneteenth as if the work towards liberty and genuine equality is done. It is not done. It was never done. And back in the Philippines, with José Rizal, the same pattern. The Spaniards executed him for telling the truth. Then the Americans turned him into a symbol. A symbol that, it's easier to honor than to genuinely understand. They literally put him on the pedestal. They built monuments, put his face on our money, and made him the face of Filipino nationalism, while ignoring the actual systems he was trying to dismantle. José Rizal exposed how colonialism and imperialism operated, not just through violence, but through education, religion, and identity. He called out how we were taught to obey, to doubt ourselves, and to internalize the lie that we were less. He encouraged us to fight for genuine liberation. José Rizal warned us that the most dangerous chains are not the ones on our bodies, but the ones on our minds. Because once that colonial mindset sinks in, then you can raise a whole generation that doesn't even realize they're still under control. People who don't even realize that they're continuing to uphold and protect the very system that continues to exploit them. But that part of the lesson rarely gets remembered. I mean, people memorize his name, his full name, José Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Realonda. People quote a line from his book or poems. People pass the test, but then move on, without ever genuinely understanding or genuinely embodying what Rizal was really saying. Because to be honest, for many of us, it is easier to celebrate a sanitized version of resistance than to engage and truly face what resistance and liberation really demands. Now, if we're gonna talk about Juneteenth or José Rizal, then we better be honest about what they're really up against. Because these things mean nothing if the same systems of exploitation are still in power, if the same systems are still running the show. Now here's the thing that most history textbooks probably won't even tell you. That in most cases, in many places, people didn't just resist injustices alone. They didn't just fight exploitation by themselves. They actually found each other. And when they do, across oceans, across languages, they found the same patterns of injustices, the same patterns of exploitation. And in most cases, they didn't just, observe from afar. They chose to stand together. They chose to stand in solidarity with one another. Just think about it. The same country that proudly ended slavery was also the same country that was building an empire in the Pacific. So in 1898, when the US invaded the Philippines while pretending to be our ally, they actually sent black soldiers to the front lines to enforce colonial rule overseas, to crush the newly independent First Philippine Republic. And these were black men who were still dealing with extreme racism and violence back at home. And so a lot of them saw what was happening in the Philippines and started questioning it. They saw civilians getting brutalized, villages getting burned, and entire communities treated like they didn't matter. In one major island alone, the order was to kill everyone over the age of 10. This was not a minor island. This was in Samar, one of the largest islands in the Philippines. They saw how Filipinos were treated as less than human, how we were seen as nothing but little brown monkeys. And the black soldiers recognized this because for them, this was not new. It was the same white supremacy that abducted, enslaved, exploited, and dehumanized black people for centuries. Now, on the other hand, the Filipino people understood that too. Filipino revolutionaries didn't just wait around hoping that someone would see the same things, that someone would understand the parallels between their struggle and the oppression faced by black people. Instead, the Filipinos reached out. They handed out letters, spoke directly to black soldiers, and made the connection clear. This is not your war. Join us instead. The Filipinos extended a hand in solidarity in a fight that transcended borders, race, and language. And many of these black soldiers responded. For example, Captain David Fagan is perhaps the most well-known black soldier to defect during the Philippine-American War. But the thing is, he was not alone. Many black soldiers questioned their role in the war. Many defected to fight alongside Filipinos, while many others resisted, quietly, by refusing orders, sharing supplies, or passing information to the Filipinos. And this solidarity extended beyond the battlefield. For example, Filipinos who fought alongside Captain David Fagan didn't just tolerate him. They welcomed him with open arms. And just like many black soldiers and teachers sent to the Philippines during the war, Captain David Fagan became, quite literally, part of the family. And again, Captain David Fagan was not alone. Unknown to many, a lot of black soldiers and teachers stayed in the Philippines, marrying Filipinas, building lives, not just because they fell in love, because according to them, Filipinos treated them with more kindness and dignity than they ever got back in America. That kind of solidarity didn't just come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of a vacuum. It came from shared experiences under the same systems of injustices and exploitation. And perhaps more importantly, it came from the choice to do something about it, to fight for freedom and liberation. So if this got you thinking about, what history really means, then good, because that's exactly the point. Because stories like Juneteenth and José Rizal's birthday are not just about the past. They're about the choices people made in impossible situations. They're about what resistance looked like when the odds were overwhelming and how those choices ripple into the present day. And if you want to dig deeper, especially into what happened to the Philippines after the US took over, check out my video on Captain David Fagan, or grab copies of any of my books or coloring books. Especially this one, the very first book that I've actually written, Black Lives and Brown Freedom, Untold Histories of War, Solidarity, and Genocide. It's a book all about the untold history and the untold bond between Filipinos and black people during the Philippine-American War in their struggle towards liberation from American imperialism. So check them out in the links below. Maligayang kaarawan po, Gat José Rizal, and happy Juneteenth to everyone. See you next time when Tagalog kita kits and in Kapampangan, Minkitiks and in Binisaya, kita aita.